All right, today's demo day 17, and can y'all believe that there was only one more episode, which will be tomorrow in this whole demo series. And then it is going to move to a renovation series, which is pretty cool. I went ahead and finished up the framing yesterday, so today I'm going to start with the insulation. Now this is how I cut insulation. There's a million ways to do it, but I get a framing square right there, line it up with however long I need it, and get a sharp razor blade, press my framing square in, and run the razor blade along the edge. Cuts perfectly every time, and it's always worked great for me. Now, this is just regular R13 insulation, nothing crazy, nothing special about it. You can find it at any hardware store. You see one of them's kind of a brown color there and the other's pink. That's just because the brown insulation I used for the roof and I was in a pinch, so I went to my, it's like a builder's discount center that we have here, and that's all they had there was the brown stuff, but is literally the same thing as the pink stuff. Now for the front, I had a little extra room where I didn't quite pull the tarp as tight as I would like, but there's really not a whole lot to do about it now that I've had it in. So the front, I did a full sheet, and then this upper part right here, I actually did a half sheet of insulation. So I cut it and then basically just ripped the entire thing in half. This is super common in RVs to only have half a sheet of insulation, mostly specifically for walls. I have never seen an RV that has had a full insulation in the walls before. So half insulation is common and it's okay to do. These campers are constantly losing and gaining heat anyway, but this is really just to kind of give it an extra chance of holding in that hot or cold air, whichever you're trying to do. Now, some people have asked me in the past, why don't you use like foam boards for this? Wouldn't it be better? Blah, blah, blah. Well, my main disadvantage of doing that is the R value on foam board is really, really low. So at least with this loose stuff right here, you got a much higher R value than if you would use foam board. So that is why I use this. And as you can see, I'm going to fill every single little nook and cranny and hole that I can and pack this stuff in there as tightly as possible with definitely leaving room for my flooring to go in, which is part of the reason why I did that half sheet in the first place. That way it doesn't stick above my framing right there, because I don't want it to get like stuck and start pressing down and putting any type of pressure on that tarp that I've got underneath there. So this process goes pretty quick. As you can see, I'm filling every single spot, even the little tiny ones up at the front. And then my last spot right here is this spot on the corner. You see I'm using scissors right there. That's just a lazy girl's method because I didn't feel like cutting it with the knife. So, I mean, you can really use whatever you want to use right there. And then I got a little spot over in the corner right there. And that is pretty much it for insulation. So next, I'm basically going to draw out my first piece right here. So typically I like to start at the front of the camper and work my way back, but this is almost exactly 12 feet. And so I want to be able to not have to cut it or use any. Basically, I want to use 3 whole sheets of OSB on this. So I'm going to start with this first piece, and then I'm going to work my way down. I also like to start with the hardest one first, just because it just makes life easier. If something goes wrong with the first piece, then at least you know that your next 2 pieces are going to be super easy and you can't mess it up. So I drew this out and I'm taking a bunch of measurements, and then I'm going to take my little sketch that I made right there and take it over and cut it outside and then bring it back into the camper. So this is OSB. For this specific camper, I actually measured the correct height that I needed on my framing. So I already know that this is going to fit and be flush with the floor. I did choose a little thicker flooring. This is, I think, 11/32 or something like that. But again, you can use whatever flooring you want. I just thought the 7/16 stuff wasn't quite thick enough for what I wanted. Now I'm going to start with cutting this to width. And obviously I'm going to keep that 4 feet, but then this is, I think it's like 96 or 98 inches. I want it to be 93. So I'm going to start by cutting this board to 93, and then I'm going to make my other cuts right after I make that one. So next, if you see, I have my drawing that I already made right there, and I put it basically facing the direction that I'm going to be putting this in the camper. So you don't want to make the mistake of like accidentally flipping it upside down, and then you're going to have to basically flip your sheet over and the smooth side of the OSB isn't going to be facing upward, which is exactly what you want. You do not want the rough part facing up, because when your flooring goes on, it just makes it a little rougher than it's supposed to be. And really the only tools that I'm using for this is a tape measure. I've got my pencil and I've got my framing square. So I basically just measure and use my framing square to make sure I have nice square lines right there, and just cut it out. I mean, if you're relatively good at math, this will be fairly easy for you. This is why I always like to draw it out first, because in my mind it makes more sense to do that. That way I can kind of look at the picture and look at the position that the flooring is going to go in, and make sure that what is in my head matches what I'm seeing in the camper, if that makes any sense. So right here, I'm going to make my first cut. Nothing crazy about this. This is just my circular saw. And I'm cutting it kind of in the middle right there, because I don't need this whole section right there. And you'll see why once I actually cut out this entire piece. Like I said, this is going to be the hardest piece to cut out. All of the other ones are going to be super easy, because it's basically just cutting the 4x8 panels to 93 inches, and that's it. So as you can see, I did bring out my jigsaw right there just to finish the cut, because if you run your circular saw all the way into that line that you just drew, it'll actually cut a little bit underneath that, and I didn't want that. So that's just me being particular about how I like to cut my pieces of wood. So that was my first cut right there, and then I'll make the second one right here. Again, you can use a saw guide if you want to, if you're not really good at freehanding cuts, but you know, this one wasn't really that big, and freehanding it is fairly easy for me now, so I'm not even going to take the time to put in my saw guide right there. Okay, time for a little test fit, and we'll see what we're working with, and we'll see how close I am. It actually really wasn't that bad, and I actually cut it square, but this part of the flooring right here was not square. So what I'm doing is I laid my piece on top, and I have my multi-tool, and I'm kind of running it along that edge. So I'm going to cut off whatever part right there wasn't square. That way these two pieces will fit together nice and snug. So I do love my multi-tool. It's a great little thing. So once that's in, I just tap it in, and it looks really good. So I'll end up smoothing all those edges out later on. There's a little bit of a lip in one of the corners, and I'm not too fond of that, but I'm going to fix that, and you're not going to be able to see it anyway. All right, time for the second panel right here, or I guess subfloor. So all I did was cut this to 93 inches. Bring it in here and lay it down, and just be warned, it is a little tight getting this in here, especially since this slides underneath the slide right there. I have to bring it back and then pull it down and kind of tap it in place. So right here, I'm tired of this catching on this lip that's right here, so I'm just gonna trim part of the wall that I didn't trim very well to begin with, and then it slides in really well. All right, so I actually scooted those together, and I didn't like how the floor kind of gives, so I got a pencil and I marked where that top panel is on my little floor joist that I made right there. So I'm going to pull both of these back, and I'm going to install some supports that go across my framing already. That way this subfloor will make complete contact with the wood and with the floor joist that I have already. Now, I'm really glad I took the extra time to do this, because it really did help with the sturdiness of everything. So as you can see, I picked two pieces, I screwed them directly in from both sides, and then the other three pieces that were the odd pieces right there, I drilled some pocket holes and I screwed those directly into the framing. So I would suggest doing this for any spaces where your two panels meet. I actually did not do it on the front one, and that's because it's going to be underneath the bed, so nobody's ever going to be stepping on it anyway. But this one, in such a high traffic area, definitely would recommend putting that in. So now that I have those installed, I can go ahead and slide my piece back. And again, it caught on the corner right there, so I must not have trimmed it all off all the way. So I'm making sure I trimmed it all off this time, and then that just slides in great. I say great, but it actually didn't. It's still I should have taken the door frame out, but it is what it is, and I'm over it. So that's where I'm at right now. Okay, anyway, so now that that's in, tap it in, line it up with the lines that I had marked before so I know it's in the right spot. Now I'm going to go ahead and screw this down. These are, I think, inch and 5/8, inch and 7/8 deck screws. You can use really whatever type of screws you want, but I just like deck screws, and I had a million of them from when I built a wheelchair ramp for a couple people. So I'm just going to go ahead and use these because that's what I have. But you can use drywall screws. You can use just literally anything that will sink into the OSB. That way it'll be nice and flat when you go to put your flooring on. All right, so that piece is screwed in. I'm going to go ahead and scooch this next piece forward and screw that in as well. So as you can see, it's a whole lot sturdier when I walk on it. It doesn't kind of bend in the middle right there, and that's exactly what I wanted. So there's no rhyme or reason to where I'm putting these screws. I'm just trying to hit all of this framing that I can, that's possible. I did end up putting a few in the middle along where those truss or the floor joists run along the length of the camper. So I put some in the middle right there, all around the edges obviously, and that is pretty much it. And then my son decided to come in because he's begging me to get my hammer, and he took it and left. All right, we're down to the last panel. Yay! Honestly, it felt like a million years getting here, but it makes me so happy to see it all going in. So I'm scooching in right here, being careful not to get the wires on the front of the camper. And then I ended up getting a little block of wood and going and finding the hammer that my son took, and a block of wood to kind of knock this left corner in just a little bit. And then after that, it's seated in there perfectly. And that is pretty much it. So after that, I just screwed it all in just like I had before. And tomorrow I'm going to tackle this front wall and put paneling on. And then there's a spot on the side right there that needs paneling as well. And then the flooring in the back. And then that should be it. Also, I haven't really had time to talk about this in my videos, but I have an extra like 10 seconds. So if you notice, the past couple times I've had new boots, and so Brunt Workwear sent me these boots, and I absolutely love them. Okay, I'm not really a fan of boots, but y'all, these are amazing. So I'm going to have to keep you updated because I've only worn them for like a week. But they're super comfortable. So if you're interested in boots, I'll let you know how they continue and how they hold up. Anyway, I'll see y'all back here tomorrow to finish up this demo series.